Hello and welcome to the Canon Creative Studio at the virtual 2022 Sundance Film Festival. I'm Ian Marks with American Cinematographer magazine, and today I'm joined by director, cinematographer, and producer Rita Baghdadi, producer Camilla Hall, and editor Grace Zarah. And we're here to talk about their film Sirens, a documentary about the guitarists of the Middle East's first all-female metal band as they wrestle with friendship, sexuality, and destruction in their pursuit of becoming thrash metal rock stars. Everyone, congratulations on your premiere in the World Documentary Competition, and welcome. So Rita, the first question is for you. What themes would you say are the focus of your documentary work?
I was trying to find a theme, a link between all my projects because they are quite different, although when you really watch them, like the styles aren't that different. But I think the central theme is community, if that makes any sense. It's like your connection to the people around you. And with My Country No More, it was like they lived in a very small town and they were all dealing with the oil boom. And with City Rising, it was they lived in these cities and they were dealing with gentrification and how they came together to sort of fight it. And with Sirens, it's the micro community of the band, and the city of Beirut and the country of Lebanon. So I guess it would be community, and like you said, it's my films really focus on people, so it's sort of the micro within the macro, and within each story, they sort of tend to have their own, they run with their own themes, I suppose, and that's not really of my doing. It's just sort of what happens to the people.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come across the story of Lyla and Sherry?
So I originally sort of discovered them. I saw this picture of them. They were 5 young women standing in a Lebanese forest, and they were all wearing black. And I remember Lyla was on the left side of the frame, and she had her arms crossed, and she looked, a little pretty angsty. And I remember just thinking, like, I really need to meet these young women. I went immediately and listened to their music. They had just released their EP on Spotify, and I was blown away by their talent. And I really had been, looking for a film to make in the region, because I wanted to tell a story that challenged perceptions, particularly Western perceptions of what it's like, to grow up in the Middle East and the MENA region. And so I was really drawn to that and just and their music and their talent and their determination, and so I struck up a conversation with Lyla online, and we really hit it off, and she invited me to come stay, me and Camilla, to come stay in her house for a week, and that was in 2018, and the rest is history, basically.
What was it about the story, their story, Lyla's and Sherry's story, that you felt made it right for filming, right for a documentary to put, in front of the cameras?
I mean, I think the world of Lebanon and the Middle East in general is portrayed in such a limited way. And Rita and I both have growing up as like Arab American girls in common. And I think both of us have felt really connected to this side of us that wasn't really shown to us or portrayed to us in the media. And there is a lot more portrayal now, but even now I feel like it's like this sort of doubling down where it's like all about the hijab and like, which is great and fantastic and should be represented. But there's this whole other really complex, like the Middle East is just this complex place that like, there's a lot to be seen and explored and understood within the culture of growing up as a young woman there. And I think being able to explore that visually is super, super important. And it's a freaking blast to watch those girls play their guitars, like not just listen to it, but like watch their fingers do their magic and watch their big dark hair headbang. And I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that it was a visual story to be told. Like sometimes you hear about documentaries and it's like, I don't know, does it need to be a movie? It could be a podcast, could be an article. But like, I think from the second I saw Rita's cinematography and any image that you ever saw of the girls online, it was like, no, this is a visual story to be told.
And what you said also to the point of the way that the Middle East is depicted on screen too, I couldn't help but remark just how beautiful Lebanon is, and it's like, well, why don't we ever see these images on TV? Like we're only used to seeing the destruction, or the conflict, right? It's almost never portrayed that way in mainstream Western media.
Yeah, that's very true. I think it was important to make it clear that this was the backdrop in which they were living in, but I really wanted to, when I set out to make Sirens, I really wanted to make a film that was not about all the bad things happening in the Middle East. And so, I think we had to strike a balance. It was a tough decision about what parts of the circumstances were we going to portray. We're never going to make everyone happy about how we portray the country because it is so complex, like Grace was saying. But I think in the end, we had to choose the ones that were directly affecting the girls. And I think the revolution was important, not because we really got into the details of the revolution, but because it's part of their origin story. And that's how Lyla and Sherry met originally, was in the middle of a protest, a riot, they call it. And, so it just felt like, and then the way it played out in the film, sort of towards the end, it just felt very organic to the story.
Yeah, I guess, for me, I studied Arabic at university, so I started going to Lebanon when I was about 22 or 23. And, I think just as a country, it constantly goes through so many changes, and there is kind of crisis after crisis, but the resilience of the people, and not just a kind of a simple resilience, but a resilience to kind of be able to have fun, to have a good time, like to go party even when everything is just falling apart. I just found that, very, very, intoxicating and fun and inspiring, that like, even when things are so terrible, I always found that, people in Beirut will, find something to celebrate and something to smile about and something to laugh about. And, I think we can all take something from that. So for me, it's just, Beirut is one of the most incredible cities in the world. I feel like everybody should go there. And, when Rita was, thinking about doing this film, it's, I think these films become much more obvious in hindsight, but I think at the beginning, it's very hard to find people that will support these kind of films. And so we did literally just, go on our own, without real financial support, to go see what the story was. And it was, for me, it was Rita's talent and incredible, approach to documentary filmmaking as just, such an intimate storyteller. And also, this kind of shared need to portray the Middle East in a more nuanced way, and to kind of get away from these cliches that we see all the time in film, and just to try to represent, how people are living normally amidst, tremendous crisis.
And Rita, to your work, speaking of your work, which is, Camilla mentioned, is, being very intimate. I also made a note, very cinematic. But each of your films has a distinctive form. And so what effect does your subject have on the way it's documented?
There's a real choice to be made about how you go about making a documentary. And I think it really has to depend on the person you're filming. It starts with a willing participant, someone who wants to have their lives documented and who wants to share their story with the world. And that was, I found that in Lyla and Sherry and the band. And then you go a step further and you say, well, what's the, like, what am I documenting? How are they living their lives? Like, it really needs to be inspired. I feel like the form is inspired by the content, so to speak, the story, and real life. And so, I knew that these girls don't wait. These women don't wait for me or for anyone. Like, they're just on their way. They're living their lives. They're on to the next thing. So I had to be very mobile and sort of lightweight. And so that's why I chose the camera I chose, and I could film all day, and it was good in low light. And so, these choices that I make are really inspired by what I'm filming, rather than trying to enforce or force a a format onto a story. It's kind of
Mhm.
the other way around for me. And so like your question was like, how are the subjects, quote unquote, the contributors, affected by the way the story is being made, the film is being made? I mean, that's like a hugely, what length lens do you use, because how close are they comfortable with you getting? It's like all these choices factor in. And early on, I want to be as intimate as possible. And so that's a conversation between me and them early on. Like, is it okay if I'm up close? Can I, so in my mind, I'm thinking, can I use a wide lens and stand 4 feet away? Or do I have to use a longer lens and zoom in if I want to get a close up? And the girls were extremely open and trusting. And it only got stronger as I filmed over the years, that they would let me get that close to them. And I enjoyed that. And I think it shows on the screen for the audience to feel close to them as well. And that was the goal.
You say over the years, how many years did it take you to make this film? Let's say like to shoot it in production.
Yeah, I mean, we shot kind of not up until the last minute, but 2018 to 2021, basically, we've shot.
Mm-hmm.
So 3
and
years.
then, wow, yeah. And then you said that the relationship between the subject, between Lilas and Sherry and the rest of the girls, they became more comfortable as you went along. But like, what about for yourself, like in terms of like your process and how you your approach to making the film? Did that evolve at all?
I think, of course, I'm sure it evolved.
Mhm.
I mean,
It feels
I think
very much like one voice, because it's like
Yeah.
it almost feels like a snapshot, because it's just it doesn't feel like a long period of time. I mean, clearly it passes, but
Yeah, I kind of like that about it. I think there are films where, like, I'm making another film
mhm,
where you want to see the passage of time, you want to feel it, because it's about uh, the story. I'm not going to say anything about it because we're still shooting, but like the story, it means something to the story to feel the passage
mhm,
of time. And in this film, I kind of wanted you to step into the mindset of the young women. And so you, like, in the edit, it kind of, you don't know how long it's been. And I think that that's really the frame of mind the girls were in. Like, everything is kind of a blur when you're that age. Like, you're just going, but also all the the things that were happening in the country and just stacked on top of each other. It's like you never knew what day it was. And so I think that that kind of contributes to it. And that it wasn't something I set out to do from the beginning, but I think that now looking back, it's like, yeah, it makes sense that it feels that way. That you don't really know how long it was filmed for.
mhm.
And so in terms of the process, I don't know, I think I definitely just got more confident. I get more confident with every film I make, that my choices and that my instincts are right. They're right for me. And I love that. I think trusting your instinct is something that is challenged every day, especially for artists. It's like you're constantly being told, well, is that the right thing? Should you have done that? Everyone's always picking apart your work, and naturally, because you're sharing it with the world. But in the end, you have to listen to yourself and think, is this the right choice for me and the film that I want to make? And I think that with every film I make, I just get more confident that, yep, these are the right choices. I have the right instinct, and I should trust that.
That's awesome. That's really cool. That's great advice.
Yeah.
And so while you're filming, like, what are you focused on? Like, are you feel like where do your instincts direct you? Like towards your subject, lighting and composition? Are you editing in your head? Like,
Emotion, 100%. The one I'm
mhm,
focused on is emotion. I go wherever that is. And sometimes it means it's not on the speaker, it's on the listener. If you're
mhm,
watching two people have a conversation, sometimes it's more interesting to watch the person absorbing whatever the other person is saying. And so it's a choice every time to, really feel in the body language, and in, what's unfolding in the background, for example. Like maybe you got a rack focus to what's happening behind them. Like and that's where the emotion is. It's happening on the street or something. So I find that following the emotion is like a true fail-safe. But I do edit a little bit in my head. I actually was like kind of an editor. Like I taught myself to edit when I was like 13, and that's kind of how I started to like think about filmmaking, was really through editing. And then when I started shooting, being a cinematographer made me a better editor, and being an editor made me a better cinematographer, and all of those made me a better director in the end. So I really attribute all those, just playing around with all those skills, to the process. But I'm trying not to edit too much in my head anymore. Like with each film I make, I'm like, again, just trust the process of the filming, and not try to think too far ahead as to like, how's this all going to cut together? Because sometimes you try to force a moment because you're like, oh, I need this cutaway, when if you just let the scene play out, you would never need to cut, And I prefer, I don't know, Grace, if you want to talk about this, but like, the less cutting you can do, the better, right?
I don't really know what more to say to the less cutting you can do, the better, but I agree. The less cutting you can do, the better.
Did you end up with a lot of footage after what sounds like 3 years of filming?
I didn't really count the number of hours, but I imagine it's in a few hundred. I think as far as feature documentaries go, it's pretty low amount of footage, but it still felt like a lot to go through. And because it's verite, you're not, piecing together images with interview. You really have to find, and I feel like Grace should be the one to speak to this, but like, you really have to find where the moment lands and then build around it. And so you have to watch every second of the footage over and over again, really. So it felt like a lot, but I don't think as far as feature docs go, it was a lot.
It did feel like a lot. Once we really honed in on what the story was, a lot fell away pretty quickly. But before then, it was a lot. And there were a lot of really beautiful scenes that didn't fit into the story that were very painful to lose in the process, even though they were like really beautiful, subtle moments between different characters.
I want to go back to what you were talking to what you said about emotion, Rita, and sort of the role that sound plays in that, in being able to recognize that, especially within a scene. And I was hoping that we're hoping that Tatiana would have, who is your co-producer. I'm sorry, her last name. I needed to get the proper pronunciation of her last name.
El Dada.
Tatiana El Dada. We were hoping to get her right as a part of this panel, but turns out she was unavailable at the last moment. But maybe you could speak to the relationship between the camera person and the sound recordists, and how that facilitates like the recognition of like emotion within a scene.
Oh my gosh, this is like, I really wish Tatiana could make it. Actually, she's getting on a plane here, which is why she can't make it. It was unclear whether she was gonna get on the plane this day or not, but it's happening. So that's all good news. But Tatiana, and maybe Camilla later, you could talk about how we met Tatiana, or like the first day we met her. But she's such a special human being. It's really I mean, I don't want to oversell it, but it's really a telepathic like situation. It's really like the relationship between camera and sound. I think in verite filmmaking, it has to reach telepathic levels, or else, in order to be like super successful. And so the relationship you have personally with that person, I mean, you're obviously like in the field together for long hours and carrying heavy equipment. But immediately, I mean, Tatiana's on the same wavelength as I would say all of our team, in that she's very highly in tune with the emotion that's going on. She cares about the contributors like very deeply, has her own personal relation, builds her own personal trust with them. And I think that's where it all starts, is like, do you actually care about these people that you're filming? Are you invested in what's happening on screen. And in some ways, like there'd be scenes where she was in tune with the emotion way sooner than I was. And I see her holding, the boom over here. And so I kind of follow her lead, and we kind of do this dance silently, like never talking, and just looking at each other. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting, and I'm really excited to work with Tatiana again, because I think that relationship will only get better over time. But yeah, Camilla, and Camilla did sound for the first, I think, 2 shoots, right? Before we met Tatiana.
Yeah, it was definitely very important for us to find someone to do sound, because I am definitely not a sound recordist. I took a couple of lessons before we went. But yeah, I think it was
Camilla,
really...
to your credit though, that's like some of the hardest sound to record I've ever seen. I mean, recording like verite moments in between like metal is like, that's no joke. Like
it was pretty hilarious, to be honest. I was happy to get anything, I think was really my goal, just make sure that I could record something. No, I think it was really important for us on the team to find a Lebanese female sound recordist. And we ultimately just found a couple of names that we could try to find. And I think when we met, Tatiana, it was very clear, just her personality was just so perfect for this. Like we could just, we could just tell that she was going to be part of our team. And we took that decision to buy equipment for her, to basically empower her to do this job, and to do it with, the best possible gear that we could afford. And I think that was, for me as a producer, I think that was just a really important decision that we took, and that Rita kind of drove that decision to do that. And it was important for us, I think, in the process of making the film, to not feel like we're just arriving in Lebanon to take a story, but to tell a story with Lebanese filmmakers, and make sure that this is something that is really, truly reflective. And in a way, Tatiana as a sound person was, so critical to the storytelling of the film, because she heard everything, and she was understanding, and she was helping Rita, form the story as they were shooting as well. So she was really really critical in terms of the shaping of the story. And as Rita said, just, cared so deeply for the contributors, but also about how her country is portrayed and how the city is portrayed and the nuances of that. So it was such an important decision for the film. And, she's just been phenomenal.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, especially you have to pick the right person if they're going to be participating for all intents and purposes in these intimate conversations and moments between the subjects. They have to feel just as safe with her as they do with Rita.
Mm-hmm.
And Rita also, that's sort of part of like your work as a filmmaker, like empowering other artists, other female artists. Correct? With you have a couple of different programs that you work with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a mentor with an organization called Global Girl Media for many years, and now I'm on the board. And I do some programs, offshoot programs with like Brown Girls Doc Mafia and Retake Oakland and several others. And Camilla also does a little bit of mentorship. And I think that's really, it's just a proven, effective method to raise up women of color and other, underrepresented individuals in the industry, is mentorship. And so that's just something I can give. And I believe in giving as much as you take. And, this industry can feel very take a lot of times. And so that's just very important to me. And so, yeah, Tatiana, although she's a professional, she just, didn't quite have all the equipment. And I just think, like Camilla said, that was just a no-brainer. And so she now owns it, and she can use it for her next jobs. And but yeah, I learned so much from her, and from everybody I mentor, as they do from me, likely.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys, the two of you are going to work together again, correct?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's on her way here, and we'll be scheming for sure.
Cool. All right. I'm going to bring it back to the camera real quick. And your decision to use a 240 to 1 aspect ratio, the widescreen aspect ratio. I think that was like one of the most distinctive aspects visually of the film. Yeah, I mean, subtle, but it's like remarkable in a way. Like it really changes the I guess literally the framing, and also like figuratively the framing. It puts you in like a more cinematic mindset when you're watching.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I felt.
Yeah. Well, I think again, form sort of follows form is like functional for me in the very beginning stages of a project, because I don't like to force something that doesn't feel earned. So the reason I chose scope at 239 is because I knew that there were going to be moments where I had to film all 5 ladies in a frame. Mm-hmm. So I was going to be using a very wide lens, and naturally when you're using a wide lens, there's all this other stuff you're seeing, and so in order for it to feel intimate, you sort of have to crop down and say, but I only want you to focus on this, Mm-hmm. So to get that that shot of all 5, and okay, of course there's a lot of them got cut out of the film in the end, but I don't regret the decision to do that, because I still think that it creates a more intimate feeling when you can really mm-hmm. Limit what the audience is seeing. So it was a functional decision at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Were you doing a lot of because you had all that extra room on the head and foot to work with, were you able to go back in, and did it give you flexibility and being able to find new frames in post? And this is, I guess, could also be a question for Grace as well.
Yeah, I don't think that we did a lot of that, but mm-hmm. Definitely Grace chime in. I think that the film kind of just the frames were the frames. I mean, mm-hmm. yeah, there's definitely leeway if you want to move it a little bit this way or a little mm-hmm. bit that way, but.
Did you have frame lines? Were you shooting for 240?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So it was always framed that way from the very
first
day. Yeah. But cool. Grace, did you do any sort of jujitsu there?
I feel like some of that jujitsu happens so early in the edit that you mm-hmm. completely forget that you did that. And in your mind, that's how it was shot too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I have no idea, but I think you're right. I think you were shooting the frame as it generally was. And occasionally I would punch in on one person or another person, but not often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So shooting spherically then too, not anamorphic, right?
No, yeah. I mean, we shot on the Canon C300 Mark II, so it's a Super mm-hmm. 35 sensor and just 16:9 naturally. So
Rita and Grace. Oh, sorry.
I was only going to say, Ian, it might be worth, just because Rita shot with filters, which is quite mm-hmm. a kind of, it just might be interesting for your guys' audience. I don't know, but.
Oh no, I didn't realize that. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, we shot with a Promis black filter. I can't mm-hmm. remember. I think it was a quarter. Mm-hmm. But basically just left it on the lens the whole shoot. And something that Camilla and I discussed early, she suggested, she was like, well, what do you think about, what's the look going to be? And I think that what the filter brought for me when I did some tests was this it's like a simultaneously dreamy yet gritty look, because it added a little bit of grain to it, and it kind of dirtied up the image just a little bit, but it also would bloom the light, and it gave a softness to everything that I just loved, this juxtaposition between the dreamy and the gritty, which is exactly what, again, mm-hmm. The form follows the story, and that's exactly how the story is. So it was, again, a very early decision that we didn't really know how it was going to play out, but it felt right.
Yeah, now that you mention it, there is that scene where Lyla and her girlfriend go to Syria, and they go to the beach, right? Is that, am I remembering that?
Her girlfriend from Syria comes to
From
Lebanon
Syria.
on the beach. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they go to the beach, and it's just that whole sequence of them in the water and then the sun hitting the water was just really visually striking. It didn't look like video. It didn't look like film. There was like a quality about it that I couldn't put my finger on. But now that maybe that was the filter sort of helping you along there, because it's a really beautiful sequence. And I wanted to we could maybe even talk about the role of color grading and how that, the role that plays, in sort of the cinematic quality of the film. Rita and Grace, I really like to just maybe have the two of you comment on the relationship in the editorial process. Because Grace has the credit, but clearly as the director, you're going to have some input, and if you could maybe like speak a little bit about that. When does the film start together, and like how it came together in terms of being cut?
Yeah, Grace, do you want to?
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing I really struggle with as an editor is I'm not really as introverted as a lot of other editors are. Like, I love company, and I like the feeling of like when I do something that I get excited about, being able to share it like right away, not like export it, text it to the director, and then they're like, thumbs up, like that's like not really satisfying enough for me. So and it was all of this happened at the beginning, like early pandemic days. So there was a little bit of pandemic confusion at the beginning. And then once we sort of realized like, well, if you get COVID, I'll get COVID. We were like, okay, let's just like be together all day, every day, forever. And the flow of editing totally changed, like dramatically changed, I think. I mean, it's all kind of a blur, but we were working from an assembly, I think, maybe more of like selects by the time we were actually sitting in the room working together. But from really early on, we were in sync about what we thought the movie was about. And I think our instincts of like being really drawn to the subtle moments between the girls was like from the beginning the same. I would say one thing that I struggled with that Rita kind of had to push me on was the portrayal of the country. Because my resistance to people's assumptions about Lebanon get in the way of me like actually admitting how messed up of a country it is. I was like, what's another word for the F word? How messed up that country is. And it's complicated. And because it's like almost like I feel protective about this country. So I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. Like nothing. You can't say anything's wrong about Lebanon. So I really struggled to actually be honest about some of the hardships of what it is to live in Lebanon right now. And Rita really had to push me to be more honest about what's going on in the country and to include it in the film.
Yeah, we had, I think, again, like Grace said early on, we were very much on the same page about what this film was going to be about. We didn't know how we were going to pull it off necessarily because I would say the challenge of the edit was that a lot of the details of the story between Lyla and Sherry were actually in backstory. And so it's a big challenge to me making a verite film, which we were committed to doing, with a lot of backstory detail that's very important to the story. And so weaving that was going to be a big challenge, and we didn't know how it was going to work out, but clearly Grace did an amazing job. We also had, I think one thing that really helped us was all the advisors and editorial consultants. We had friends along the way that watched the film and gave us notes, because bouncing that, you get so stuck in a loop and you think you're doing one thing and it's not translating. And so to be able to test the film with we just have an abundance of an amazing editors in town and friends that are incredible in documentary filmmaking. And we had Lindsay Utes as our supervising editor, who helped us early on, and we bounced things off of, and people like David Teague and Dan Lindsay and TJ Martin and Kim Roberts and all of them. And, each one watched a cut and would kind of give us feedback. And so bouncing that off of people also people that weren't in the field, people that aren't Lebanese, people that, so that was super helpful too.
Going back to the role of the color grade in the editorial process, I saw you had your grade performed at Night Shoes. Who was your colorist there?
Maria Carretero.
Yeah. And then, Grayson, you were speaking about the honesty, I think, that you wanted to convey in this picture. I think part of that, is, color, I think, really plays a huge part in that. And can you maybe just speak to the role that, to how Maria was her name? The colors, into the role Maria played in this process of finishing the film and helping maintain that sort of creative honesty.
Yeah. Well, Camilla was the one who suggested Maria. She had been following her work for a while, and I met with her. And Maria, again, is one of those like incredible human beings that you're like, everybody needs to know this person in their life. She is, her enthusiasm for a project is like infectious. And so what I always struggle with coloring a film in the end is just that I get excited about doing it, but to watch your work over and over and over and over again, you just start to really get sick of it. And I start to hone in on all the things I wish I did differently, especially because I shot it as well. And so that's always a big challenge for me. But Maria, from day one, like her enthusiasm, her passion, her, again, care, I felt the care that she had for the contributors. Like she genuinely like fell in love with Lyla and Sherry and cared about them. And I think that care translates to the color in ways that like, it's like, we don't even know how color affects our brains, really, I feel like. But just she cared about the way the world was going to perceive them and the way the world was going to experience this film. And so she really put so much love and attention into the details. And I think it just like, the film came alive all over again in color, like they say, but it really did for me.
What were some of the details that you wanted to pay special attention to?
Well, I knew I wanted the film to be saturated. Again, this sort of dreamy intensity, and Maria was on board 100%. Like I didn't even say that to her, and she sent me a test, like a couple frames, and she's like, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "We're already thinking exactly the same thing." But she, the details, like finding a balance between that saturated intensity, but not making it feel again like we were forcing a style onto the film because it is a documentary and we wanted it to be as realistic and raw as possible. So that balance between the dreamy, the saturatedness, but also the real and the raw, it's like, we had a lot of conversations about that. And so the color, just the color pop. When can we make the color pop where it feels earned, where it feels like realistic? Even in the sky, on the walls, anywhere, in the
at
light.
The beach.
Yeah, at the beach, the light,
Yeah.
the sunset. Like, where does it feel earned? And so those were our conversations.
Yeah, and then going just back to that scene again, just the color in that scene. I made a note, ectochrome. Just like a kind of like a color reversal, the kind of stock that you would take on a vacation with you to the beach, it has that like gritty, it had like the color was a little bit, like you said, a little bit gritty, but still like really gorgeous and arresting.
Well,
So
it's funny, I picked up taking 35 millimeter stills again during the making of this film. I haven't done it in years. Like I started shooting film when I was 11 and I took photography and whatnot, but like I kind of dropped it for many, many years. And when, once I picked up a digital camera and during this film, I wanted to get images of the girls for the poster. And so I bought this like $40 Canon point and shoot, and I just took it with me everywhere. And so I think that also was sort of inspiring because when I would get the images back, it's just like it's Christmas every time. You're just like, oh, wow, that's the image I took. It's so beautiful. And I think that surprise and like you said, the saturation that film can bring, and the grain and all that. We did add grain onto the film, the end result as well. And so I think, a filmic look was the result.
Yeah, and it's a really remarkable result too, though, and not just like visually, but like the way that you and Grace were able to interweave the stories about the music and the girls' relationships and the social unrest in Beirut. I mean, they were interwoven in real life too, but it's just really conveyed so beautifully and naturally in the film. So yeah, it was we really enjoyed watching it, and again, congratulations on your premiere and the competition. Yeah.
I was just going to say one thing, like based on what you said about Maria, but even just during this kind of interview, I think it's made me really realize that, every single person that we brought onto the team, it was all about, who they were. And we actually, almost every single person was a very difficult hire, in the sense that, Grace had taken a hiatus from editing. We had to convince her to come back to editing because we knew it was her film. Maria was based in New York, even though we're in LA and we have so many colorists that we could have worked with. We just, Rita connected with her and really wanted to work with her. And then our composer was based in Paris. And again, it was just, Rita was so in love with his sound that, it was worth us figuring out how we could work with a composer in Paris. And then the same, with Tatiana in Lebanon, it was, she was the right person. So we did whatever we could to make it work so that she could do it. And I think that that's really a kind of a through line on the film. It's just been about who are the right people, and then us figuring out how we make it work so that they can be part of the team.
Awesome. Well, it works beautifully. So yeah, and again to you and the team, to Rita and Grace and Camilla, thank you for being here with us to discuss the film, and wish you all the best of luck in the competition, and hopefully we'll get to see this film in wide release very soon.